So we continue the climb to 2200 rapid elo, and I'm going to open with c6 against d4, and my opponent chooses to go for a Slav Defense. Now, for those of you who play the Caro Kann, which I know there will be many of you, the Slav Defense in many ways resembles a Caro Kann, but in other ways it's a more aggressive version, but it depends entirely on what my opponent goes for. The point is that as opposed to a traditional Queen's Gambit decline sort of position, we're not going for e6, which would block our light squared bishop, right? So if white plays kind of lazy moves, we have the option of developing our bishop and then shutting the pawn chain shut. My opponent takes on d5, which isn't an exchange Slav, because that would be an exchange in this position. But instead he goes for it after the knights are developed. And we have two choices. Of course, we can take with the pawn, but we can also take with the knight. Now, if we take with the knight, we have to anticipate that my opponent would probably play pawn e4, and after take, white has a pretty substantial center, although we could go for a quick e5 to try to challenge that center, and if takes, a move like queen to a5 would pick the pawn back up if required. Or we could potentially just trade queens, and these pawns aren't necessarily too impressive. So we can go for either, to be fair. Taking with the c-pawn is probably objectively slightly better, but I feel like knight takes is the more interesting option. At least, I'm sure I've played a couple of games from this position. One of the things we have to consider is the fact that I completely forgot about the fact that queen a5 actually doesn't come with check because the c-pawn is blocking. Although I'm not sure it's that big a deal because white will have to defend both pawns, and a move like queen d4 we can probably go bishop c5, so that looks pretty good to me. On e5, the move that we really need to think about is pawn d5, right? And is that a problem? I'm inclined to say no, because we can put our bishop on c5, get castled, and maybe even try to strike with a quick f5, which looks quite interesting. So I think this is the move I want to go for. Now, also bear in mind that whilst white can take and white can push, he doesn't have to do either, and my opponent doesn't. He instead develops his knight to f3, applying pressure to the pawn. And of course, if white takes with the knight, that's not very good for us at all. So the first move I'm thinking of is bishop g4, simply pinning the knight. And if h3, I think we probably take, because if queen takes, then we win a pawn, right? So that's nice and easy. And if here take and he takes with the g-pawn, well, that's not very impressive. Like, I mean, e4 is very well secured, sure, but the white king side is compromised, and we can continue our development quite easily with a move like knight d7, or maybe even taking. So I think I like the look of bishop to g4, and my opponent goes bishop to e2, which is probably the better move. And here we have to make a decision, because again, if we do nothing, then white will just take, and that won't be good, because white will be up a clean pawn. So we can consider knight d7 potentially. And if knight e5, let's say d e5, bishop e2, queen d8, rook d8, king e2, we're down a pawn in that position. I guess f4 is coming to defend the e5 pawn, which is not the greatest thing in the world. So alternatively, we could take and voluntarily trade off our light squared bishop for the knight. We could also take on d4, which I think I actually prefer. Namely because if this diagonal opens up, bishop to b4 looks slightly annoying to deal with. I mean, bishop b4, bishop d2. Wait. Can we take on f3 and then go bishop b4? And if bishop d2, we can take on d4. And if bishop b4, queen b4, check. And we just up a pawn. That looks like we're going up a pawn. No? After bishop takes, I don't think it makes a difference if you take with the g pawn, still bishop b4. So if take bishop b4, white will be forced to play king to f1 if he wants to avoid losing a pawn. But then we just castle, and we're doing quite well by the looks of it. So that looks quite nice. Now the reason I'm not going bishop b4 straight away is because after bishop to d2, if I take on f3, I think white can take on b4 rather than taking back. So I think this is probably the more accurate way to deal with this. And of course, if bishop b4, bishop d2, and we play something like take, well, if we take the knight, the queen is nicely defending d4, so we're not going to win a pawn there. But by playing bishop b4 in this position, it looks to me like we're forcing the white king to step to f1, which is definitely good for us. Like, this is a success of an opening, for sure. 11 moves in, I'd say the opening phase has not ended, but it's more so a middle game now. After I castle, which I don't see a reason not to do. Although, I don't know, maybe castles rook to b1. Is that annoying? a5, a3. Bishop c3, rook b7. That's quite interesting, actually. Maybe I shouldn't castle. What about... Can I just go for the immediate bishop c3 with tempo on the rook and the pawn? Rook b1 forced. If bishop to d4, rook to b1, it's not the most amazing thing in the world, is it? And b6 is going to weaken the c6 pawn significantly, so I'd like to avoid that, really. Maybe it's best to go... Well, knight d7, knight b6 is nice, but it does block my queen for the time being. And if knight b6, rook b1, I mean, I have to defend my bishop. And I don't really have a good way to do that. So, okay, I don't think I can just castle. I need to be smart about this. If I can figure this position out, though, I should just have a better middle game, because this white rook will struggle to get into the game unless white plays something like g3, king g2, which I suppose looks viable, to be fair, and maybe his bishop pair can come alive somehow onto the queen side. Maybe bishop b2, maybe. Not yet, of course, but at some point. So, okay. Bishop c3, rook b1. What about queen d4? Queen d4, bishop d4, rook b7, bishop b6. I'm not convinced. I mean, e5 looks quite annoying, opening this bishop up onto the c6 pawn and the a8 rook. I don't particularly like that. What about knight a6, defending the bishop? So if rook b1, castles a3, bishop c3, rook b7, bishop d4. It's interesting. Maybe the knight comes into c5 with tempo. I think knight a6 might be the way to go. I also just need to make a decision, because I have spent about 3 minutes on that move. But I think it's an important move. Also, with the knight developed, it's probably easier to defend the b7 pawn. Maybe. And also, I guess on a6, the knight isn't blocking the queen's scope. The annoying thing is this bishop potentially opening up on this diagonal, though, because there's a lot of targets, and d5 could open those up quite nicely for white. So we may have to play a move like rook to c8 to get off of the diagonal and support the c6 pawn, but we'll figure that out when it comes to it. For the time being, my opponent goes bishop to e3, just reinforcing his center, which makes sense. I guess castling looks like the easy move to play. I suppose I can't really stop pawn d5. I mean, bishop c3 makes no sense anymore because d4 is well defended. A move like knight c7 could be playable at some point, trying to prevent pawn d5, but realistically, white has 3 pieces on it, and I'm going to need 4. And knight c7 would add 3, but I don't know how I get another piece there, unless I do something like queen d6 or d8, which is a big time commitment. So I think I'm just going to castle for the time being, because at least I have the advantage of being able to castle, which white does not. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. And it's interesting because, like, this pawn structure is very strange, where white has E and D pawns, and I have C and B pawns, right? Like, white has the big center, but it's kind of like this hanging pawn structure. I mean, in fairness, the F pawn can come and support, but for the time being, it can't because the bishop's in the way. So I guess the question would be, can these pawns survive or not? And if they can, white is probably maybe better. I mean, his king is still stranded. Okay, I like the look of the move queen a5, supporting the bishop and putting pressure on a2, also making moves like a3 very difficult to accomplish, and freeing up the d8 square for a rook, which would be much nicer, because lining up a rook with the queen can't be a bad thing. Moves like f5 should be considered at some point, potentially, to try to break apart this pawn structure or force a commitment. You know, I don't know, something like f5, e5, f4, pushing the bishop back, and maybe d4 hangs, for example. It might be a bit of a pipe dream, but it's worth considering. The issue is, what do I do about my bishop? If I go c5, I'm concerned about the b7 pawn becoming very vulnerable. And I mean, if the b7 pawn gets taken, I'm going to be in a very bad situation. If f5 is played too early, there is also queen b3 ideas. So, for example, like f5, rook b4, knight b4, queen at b3, check. I don't know, knight d5, ed5, ed5, bishop d5, king h8, bishop b7. That looks very uncomfortable. I don't like that at all. So we have to be careful of that. So I'm kind of leaning towards the move queen a5. I suppose I can also consider a move like queen e7, supporting the bishop and the b7 pawn. Which, now I'm thinking about it, I might prefer. Also putting pressure on e4, and we're freeing up the d file for a rook. That's interesting. I think I like that. I think I like that a lot. Yeah, this looks correct to me. And then maybe we can bring the bishop to b6 or something, because the queen will support b7 in the meantime to block up the c file, put pressure on d4. That looks quite interesting. I mean, for now, the bishop's fine. We can always put it on a3 if we need to, or maybe even d6 if necessary, although e5 could be quite annoying to deal with. But this is a good position, I think. We have a clear path to getting our remaining pieces in the game, whereas for white it's a bit more difficult. That's a very interesting move. I'm not concerned about bishop g5, because I think I just have f6. And now that my queen supports the bishop, something like taking queen to b3 check isn't a problem, because my queen defends the knight. So I don't think this actually threatens anything. Just, I don't know, rook e8, rook d8? No? In some order. I could go for this immediately, but I think I prefer just to go rook d8. Maybe a8 hangs? Rook d8, d5, take. Bishop c5, maybe? I don't know. Is this rook better here? Because then I can keep an eye on this. I think so. I think f5 might be an overcommitment anyway. So perhaps this rook isn't needed on the f file. And although having a rook on the e file would be nice, this bishop supports the e4 pawn well, and f3 might be played to support the pawn in the future anyway. So I suppose the more important thing to go after is the d4 pawn and trying to prevent it from coming to d5 with like bad consequences for us. Maybe that's how we should be approaching this. We're also getting a little bit low on time, down to 5 minutes. My opponent barely spent a minute, so we are going to have to be slightly careful with our time usage here. Also, apologies for the lack of uploads recently. I have, as I've mentioned previously, I've moved in with my girlfriend. Currently, I'm recording from her parents' house because I've traveled down there for a few days, and we also don't have internet in the flat yet. We get internet on the 15th. I don't know why it's taking so long, but apparently it just is. So yeah, I will get back to regular uploads when I can. Queen b3 is an interesting move because now bishop to g5 is a threat because I can't play pawn f6 because the pawn is pinned. And if I go king h8, preparing pawn f6, I mean, the bishop and the pawn are slightly tender. However, I don't think white can go for a move like, I don't know, king h8, pawn a3, take, queen take, rook take. Yeah, like rook b8, rook a7, and rook b1, and I'm going to be winning there. So I think white has to be careful still. So I think king h8 is the way to go. Just getting off of this diagonal because, yeah, f6, stopping pawn f6 by pinning the pawn so that bishop g5 will skewer my queen and rook is a very sneaky threat. Very sneaky threat. So now that's dealt with. And I suppose the queen is in some ways in an improved position on b3. Pressure on the b file, pressure on the bishop, pressure on f7. But in other ways, it's slightly worse because the d pawn is now only defended by the bishop, right? So the d pawn is more tender. However, the d pawn was pinned to the queen previously, so maybe that's a slight upgrade. And the queen also does defend the d5 square. So a move like pawn d5 is still very much playable. Whether it's good or not is a different question. See how he proceeds. A move like rook c8 looks interesting, preparing c5 ideas. e5. I think he's still trying to go for bishop g5, you know. I think that's the idea. Because now if f6 take, well, I ruin my structure. But then again, can he really exploit that? I don't think he can. Let's say I play, I don't know, rook b8. For example, bishop g5, pawn f6, take, bishop back to e3 to defend d4. And then what? The game goes on. You know, f6 is weak, but so is d4. It's a big commitment to play pawn e5. So it makes d5 much, much harder because e5 would be very weak and so would d5. Maybe c5 is worth considering to try to undermine the e5 pawn. b7 is defended for now. If c5 bishop g5 f6, take, bishop e3, well then we just take. If c5 d5, we just take. If c5 take, I suppose it's bishop to b7, which is an issue. So maybe we should prepare it with rook b8. Rook b8, bishop to g5, pawn f6, take, bishop e3, pawn c5, pawn d5. Then our bishop is well protected. And still this rook can't get into the game just yet because the king would have to go to h2 And then it might be vulnerable anyway, because h4 could hang. So maybe g3, king g2 is the way to go. But again, that's a big time commitment. It's a big time commitment. And I feel like maybe instead of this whole h4 idea, white could have just gone for g3, king g2 instead. But I don't know. Maybe if he were to let his foot off the gas and just play g3, I potentially just consolidate with bishop a5, bishop b6, and then maybe I'm better. I don't know. Tough to say. But we will be able to check with the engine after the game, of course, which should provide some very interesting insights. Yeah, I suppose I'm not thrilled by the placement of my knight. I would love to put my knight on the d5 square. That would be fantastic, but that would hang the bishop for the time being. So perhaps I want to play bishop a5 next. I am aware of the fact that d5 now does open up an attack on a7. However, if d5 we have options, but he goes for bishop to g5, we're forced to play f6. I'm just not sure this is that good for white. I'm just not convinced. And maybe it is, but I don't know. There seems to be potential complications. I mean, already I'm considering ideas of mating on e1. I mean, the rook defends for the time being, but let's say the rook wasn't defending, or it could be distracted. c5 also looks very viable. If take, bishop takes, b7 is weak, but so is the white king. Then again, so is f6, but you know. Maybe bishop a5 is the easiest thing to do. Maybe even bishop d6. Maybe we're allowing d5, though. Perhaps that's not good. An interesting position. My king is not particularly safe. Neither is the white king. We're low on time. Bishop a5 looks good, but is it too slow? Well, if the king tries to run this way, h2 is going to be an issue. If bishop a5, pawn g3, bishop b6, this needs defending. I think this is the way to go. It looks decent. If d5, we have a couple of choices. If we take, rook c8. If bishop takes, again, I'm not overly convinced. I feel like, again, if we can distract this rook, we maybe have mate on e1 with the bishop and the queen. Might be a long shot, but it's worth noting. a3, that is a very strange move. I wasn't trying to put a knight there. So I think I'm just going to play quickly and go bishop b6, which can't be bad. Takes pressure off b7, takes pressure off a7, and puts pressure on d4. My bishop is now perfectly situated, and we're preparing to bring the knight into its ideal square. I feel like this is turning in our favor. I also don't really understand this a3 move, because it's just a target for my queen, right? Like, the b4 square isn't that important. I'm not trying to go there. I just took my bishop away from there. Okay, queen b2, lining this up and defending this, keeping an eye on this, makes sense. Knight c7 still looks very good. To bring the knight over to d5. We can also consider knight to b5 to go after the pawn, which is worth noting. Although, of course, knight d5 would threaten take, take, and take. If here, yeah, and he pushes the pawn. Makes sense. I think knight d5 is the clearly good move. If take, we take with a rook. We now defend the 5th rank, and we prepare to double up. We do have, you know, a bit of a compromised pawn on f6, which can be targeted, but with the rook on d5, this pawn can't advance. So actually exploiting that weakness seems difficult. And I suppose we also have the open G file, which shouldn't be written off. Should not be written off. That could be a really good attacking opportunity. And if a move like G3, maybe we have sacrifices where we can sack the exchange, and okay, that's a very strange move. What does that do? I'm not sure. Rook D8, pawn H6. Take. Well, no, then he's going to get hit with a... Oh, maybe he's going for mate? But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Okay. This king is so weak. So weak. Okay, let's double up. The d4 pawn is a big prize if we can win it. Maybe he's trying to go rook h4? Maybe that's the idea. That's really interesting. I completely missed that. That's really smart. Okay, game on. Rook f5. Going for queen takes e3 because the f pawn is pinned if king g1. I don't think we have a follow-up. No, I completely missed that move. I probably should have gone for queen d4. Stopping that, putting pressure. Definitely the better move. Yeah, that's annoying. But okay. h5 is weak, though. So queen f7 targets the pawn, which is interesting. Let's do this and just ask the question. If g4, that might be a big overextension. f5 could be considered, but it would be risky. It would definitely be risky because we'd open up this diagonal. h6, okay. So queen g6. I don't think we actually carry a threat with this move. Maybe queen d3 is interesting. Maybe rook to g8 is interesting. And a move like g3, is that a bad move? I don't know. Let's try and switch the attention. The center is good. This pawn can't move. Okay, g3. I want to play rook h5, but it feels like I should not allow this pawn to move up the board. Queen f5 threatens rook g3. The move like king g2 is played. Maybe rook to g4. This is a very strange position. I really wish I'd have found queen to e. Yeah, I think it was queen e4 after pawn h5 was played. I think that was definitely the more accurate approach, but the white position feels very difficult because there's just 3 pawn weaknesses. I mean, you can argue the h6 pawn is a strength, and in certain positions it will be. But for now, it isn't that big a deal, I don't think. So yeah, the threat is rook g3 because the pawn is pinned to the king, right? How does white respond? Again, king g2, rook g4 looks interesting. And if we get a rook trade, then I have tempo on the d1 rook. And I can maybe swing my d5 rook to h5 and look for some kind of mating attack with queen h3, which looks quite nice. Also, I can consider moves like f5, f4 in some lines, although for the time being, the bishop would just take and I'd have nothing. Also, I don't necessarily want to open up the diagonal against my king by playing pawn f5. I I mean, white can't let me take, right? Because if I take, the structure is ruined, and he loses on the spot after queen g4 anyway, picking up the rook, so that's not ideal. If he moves the rook, let's say rook h3, I mean, can he afford to give away, like, the e4 square, for example? Like, I don't know, pawn f3, queen takes, pawn takes, check, king h2, rook f5. That looks pretty rough. That is pretty rough. I mean, we sack the exchange, but the white king is completely stranded. If rook h1, avoiding the trade while defending this rook, which is interesting. Again, if I give a check on pawn f3 and take, I'm not sure it's so good. Also, I don't have rook f5. The pawn would take it. I need to remember that. I'm also aware that moving this rook allows pawn d5, but if the pawn is on f6, it doesn't necessarily come with tempo. Well, as in a check, I would have time to play another move first, and if my attack lands first, then that's all that matters. d4 is also very weak, although it is defended by 3 pieces for the time being. Oh, okay. So if take, I get mated. Interesting. If king g8, queen e7 looks problematic. That's a very good move. What about bishop c5? If take, the rook hangs. And if queen takes, rook takes, pawn takes. If I take on h4, I get mated on d8, but I should be okay. I can just go rook g8 and solve the problem. This feels like an unnecessarily fancy move. It's not a move I want to play because it feels very fragile, because it is. I mean, like queen b3, you know, doesn't look like the most fun move to face, defending the rook and attacking b7. If queen b3, maybe I have to retreat. Also, the bishop is defended, so queen e4 ideas aren't as good. If here, here, I can just return. That's fine. I think bishop c5 might be the necessary move to keep the pressure. I suppose c5 was also playable, though, which I didn't consider. The point is, I don't want the queen coming to either of these squares, e7 or f8. I mean, f8 would be checkmate immediately, potentially, but e7 also wouldn't be good. Yeah, I think I can take. And now, I mean, the rook is defended, but it's not simple. Because let's say take and white takes here at some point, then check, and I would pick up the rook anyway. This feels like I should be winning, but I'm going to have to try to be precise, because white does have counterplay. But it's looking very, very good. Looking very, very good. If king g1, I win after bishop back, I think. If king moves to e1, more difficult. White can't take here because the rook hangs. And we should be fine there. So I think I can afford to just retreat the bishop. I mean, then again, you can't take because the rook hangs. Which is also true. I don't know. Maybe I'm misplaying this, but it feels difficult because the king can kind of dance around his own pieces. And this bishop holds a lot of things together, which is really annoying. Okay. King e2, I guess. Trying to find a way through, but it's really difficult. I guess b6 is probably a good move. Just shutting off the counterplay. Also note the alignment of the queens. This bishop can't move with check, so that's okay. This is such a tense position. Bishop e4 is a major threat. I can't play it yet, but if I can, that's going to be a big, big problem. Okay. This is not a move I want to play, but I feel like it's the easiest thing to do. Just retreat and defend for now, while I figure out how I'm going to win this. Because material is equal. I mean, the white pawns suck, so does the white king, but does that work? This looks risky, but I think c5 is a good move. If take, then bishop to e5, with tempo on the queen, rook trying to infiltrate, queen hitting a4, opening up the position feels right. And if white does nothing, I mean, I can't take because I get mated. Yeah, I just get mated. So that's true. Maybe you move like queen up. Okay. It's a strong move. Retreat, so this is defended, and if take here, here. Oh, I don't have this. The queen defends that. Maybe if take, I can take. And you can't play bishop takes, right? So that's okay. It's a very difficult position. I'm also trying to ensure that queen c8 doesn't come with check, because my bishop is blocking the check. And also the bishop is watching h6, which could be useful, because then my king would be out of checkmate nats. It's a very Alpha Zero-esque idea to push this pawn all the way to h6. Okay. I don't know what the best approach is. I'm a bit concerned I've messed up, but I think just bishop takes and I'm in a bit of trouble, no? Maybe rook f5? No, then bishop f6 and I lose. Rook takes. Really? Okay. I'm still not thrilled, but feels less bad. I feel like I've messed this up, but checking this? That looks decent. Maybe queen e2. Maybe that's the way to go. No, really. But if check here, I'm safe. I'm up a pawn, which is probably good, you'd assume. It's difficult for me to access the white king, however. It's actually quite safe on f1. I wish I had more time on the clock to really consider the position previously, but that's just the way it goes. And we haven't lost, so we're doing something okay. Okay, I wasn't really concerned about that. Let's go king g7. What's the follow-up? Queen g4. King f8. I think. And king f7, I get hit with queen h5. If Queen h5 anyway. Maybe I just have to go back. Because if I move the bishop, I lose h7, and that's going to be a problem. Just f6 is so weak, as is my king. My back rank is hard to defend, as well as the g-file. That makes sense. It's the same concept as queen h5, I guess. Well, roughly. Okay, let's see if white's got anything else. I mean, here looks pretty bad to me. I'd rather have a draw than lose, considering how complicated this game has been. Obviously, I want to win, but it feels very hard to do that. Queen back to g4, king f7, queen h5. Okay. That feels wrong. Here f5, maybe that's the idea. If bishop h4, then queen g4. Queen f7 looks interesting. Eyeing this check and eyeing this. Don't know if it's good, but we need to do something. Maybe I could have considered bishop d2. But then again, even if I get queen e1, just king here. Wait. Can I do this? If this. Ooh, if he goes queen c8, I might repeat and try bishop g5. That looks interesting. Bishop g5, pawn f4, queen check, king g2. Take, if take the queen hangs. Oh, that's definitely the way to go. I mean, he doesn't have to play f4, of course, but that was the problem. That was my issue with it. So maybe I should, if he does give me this check, repeat the position and go for bishop g5. I mean, he has a couple of issues to deal with. I mean, if he allows me to take on h5, feels very bad, because I can just return to f7 whenever the check is given on the 7th rank, right? a7 won't hang, and I'll be up 2 pawns, which could be very problematic. And I could just play something like bishop g5, pawn h6, and get my king somehow into a safe position. I mean, the white king is struggling for safety now that I'm looking at the light squares. If he steps onto the e-file, I just have easy checks. If he steps onto the g-file, then I potentially have queen g8 with my king on h8 and his king on the back rank come with check, which could force a queen trade. I may lose f6 in the process, though, which would just be a draw, probably. He's also running very low on, well, not very low on time, but running lower on time. Do I take? I don't really see a reason not to. I mean, I need to have checks against the white king, right? I need checks. And if, again, if like queen d7 check, I just come here. And if queen g4 check, bishop g5, maybe now he can go pawn f4, though, because queen 2 c4 doesn't come with check. And if I do go for queen c4 and he takes, then it won't work, because his queen will be defending the bishop. But if I can survive, I'll be up 2 pawns. I mean, like, if check, I just go queen g6, and I force a queen trade, because his king is on the g-file. So, he has no checks. He has no checks. And I have a passed h-pawn. Okay, this is looking good. This is looking good. And also, don't I just have endless checks? Whether they do anything is another question. I mean, like, check here, check here, check here, check here, check here. Maybe I can go bishop to f4, though. I need to not run out of time, that's for sure. But I do get 10 seconds increment per move, and there should be some easy moves. Let's give it a check. I'm trying to get closer to the king with tempo. Check. I also want to play bishop f4, so I need my queen to try to defend that square. I can take here, though. Check here, take. But... check here, take. Check here, check here. If here, then here, and here, then I take. If bishop f4, check here, check. No, I think I should go after the pawn. Because it also defends a7 and pressures the bishop. And I have lots of checks to give. Oh, I completely missed that move. I completely missed that move. Oy, oy, oy. Okay, if take, then take. If check, bishop f8 maybe is forced. Or that is not a nice move. Oh no, now he takes with check. That's a really smart move. Now I'm losing. Oh my god. I had a completely fine position and I just missed queen f6 completely. I mean, bishop f4 wouldn't have even worked because f6 would have been hanging. Maybe bishop g5 had to be played. Like, in this position, like bishop to g5 was maybe forced. I completely missed this alignment. That's really bad. That's really bad. I mean, I will try because maybe queen and bishop versus queen is a draw. It might be a win, but it might be really hard to execute, right? And white only has one pawn remaining, and I've got 3. So all is not lost yet, but that was a very silly blunder. Very, very silly blunder. That was really dumb. Okay. Again, I'm constantly threatening to win the bishop. And if he moves the bishop, I should have a good amount of checks. Where was my king? My king was on d7. I also don't want to allow a check which forces a queen trade. Because although I've got 3 pawns versus 1, I think I should be losing in the bishop endgame. Sorry, is this not a draw yet? I'm trying to get repetition, of course. Which is why I keep putting my king on d7 as opposed to any other square. I don't want his bishop to be able to move with check. So I'm going to try and stay on the light squares. And I completely bottled it. Okay, well at least there's no bishop c5. I probably should have been running up the board. rather than to my back rank. I don't have any checks currently. The queen retreats, maybe I can start pushing my pawns, I don't know. Maybe queen e8. Doesn't really threaten anything though. There's still no checks. Yeah, that makes sense. This is a big problem. And the bishop's defended. Well, I need to stop bishop h6. So this is my best attempt. I still have no checks. The white king is completely defended by his pieces. I just have no checks anywhere. That's really annoying. If this pawn was gone, then I probably would have endless checks. But his second rank is secure. Oh, he can play it anyway. Of course he can. Well, I can resign then. I can't believe I blundered that. That's really dumb, because the game itself, up to that point, felt great. I mean, I don't know, up to like, this position, I felt like I was doing really well. And here I'm better. But anyway, let's go to the opening. So we have this like weird exchange Slav. And yeah, the engine doesn't really like knight takes. It really does want c takes. But these positions are just really boring. And I thought it would be interesting to go for knight takes. So knight takes e4, of course. Take, and e5 is the best move. Now, if white takes, there is queen a5, but I can also just take on d1. Go knight d7, and if pawn f4 defending... Oh, come on, please stop lagging. I mean, if knight to f3, then just knight c5, probably. And the only way to defend would be knight d2. And I mean, we have an interesting position. I wish this would stop lagging, though, because that's really frustrating. My opponent goes knight f3. Oh my god, come on. This is really laggy. Knight f3? No, please? Okay, I'm going to try and pause the recording. You may be able to just skip ahead or something while I figure this out, because I can't currently pause the recording. Okay, no, it's fixed. Okay. So my opponent goes knight f3, which is the best move. And it started again. God damn it. But like, here, I think bishop to g4 is actually wrong, according to the engine. It really doesn't like it. Really, really doesn't like it, which surprises me, because it felt like the most natural move. Okay, sorry, we're going to try this again. So here it's actually better to take on d4. And if cd, then I can go for the immediate bishop to b4, which admittedly I didn't see initially. And if bishop to d2, blocking, then I have to take castles. I guess I keep my light squared bishop. Maybe that's the whole point. And if bishop c4, b5, I don't know if I'd play b5, a5, castles a4, bishop c2 maybe. Bishop g4, knight e5, bishop e6. This feels very odd, but apparently it's good. It feels wrong though because of how weak c6 is, but I guess. Here my opponent should have gone bishop c4, and it's kind of reminiscent of a fantasy Caro Kann, where if I play a move like, I don't know, knight d7, I guess it's like queen b3, and I'm in pretty deep trouble. And if I'm lazy, I don't know, if I like take, then there's just endless pressure on my position. So bishop e3, well, I've jumped ahead a bit there. Bishop e2, ed4, cd4, bishop f3. The engine doesn't actually like that. It wants bishop b4. And if bishop d2, then bishop f3. And if this, bishop e2. If queen e2, then I take on d4. And if king takes, then knight a6, bishop a3, stopping me from castling, and I'm apparently slightly better. I decided to take, force the king to f1, and I thought I should be better, but I'm not. And here, there's only one move for me to maintain some form of equality, and it's not knight a6. It's actually bishop c3. I rejected this on the basis of this position looking really difficult, and if castles, apparently I'm fine. I think I was just super scared of this. Like queen a4, I'd just go bishop back to b6, which I saw, but I don't know, it just felt weird to have a rook on b7. And, you know, like knight d7, maybe c6 hangs, I don't know. But bishop e3 is the best move for my opponent in this position, which I didn't really appreciate enough. So I castled, rook b1. g3 is slightly better, which I was expecting. But rook b1, queen e7. The engine wants queen a5, which was my initial move. Going after a2. And if g3, which is the best response, queen a2, king g2, rook a8, it just feels wrong. Like, my pieces seem completely discoordinated. All for the cost of a pawn. I mean, white looks to be doing very well, but h4 from my opponent, rook fd8, queen b3, king h8. The engine wants queen e8, but that's a weird move. Because if I do something else, like, I don't know, rook c8, then bishop g5, no, not bishop g4, bishop g5, and I can't go f6 because of the pin, and then I just get skewered. So queen b3, king h8, e5, which is a good move, rook a b8, bishop g5, and here I wasn't sure about bishop g5 because I thought f6 and we were okay-ish. So bishop back to e3, bishop a5 is the best move. a3 I didn't understand, I have to admit. I did not understand that. The best move is rook h3, lifting the rook. But a3, bishop b6, queen b2, knight c7, and we're back in the game. After a4, which again felt like a strange move, knight d5. Apparently queen e6 is slightly better. Why? h5, bishop d4, bishop d4. Oh, that's a cool idea. I didn't consider that. Knight d5 though. Bishop d5, rook d5, and we're better. After pawn h5, I should have gone queen e4, which I realized after I played rook bd8. Queen e4 is clearly the best move. We're stopping this. We're putting pressure on this, pressure on this, pressure on this. It's very hard for white to move. By playing rook bd8, I allow rook h4, and I underestimated the power of it. Here the best move is c5, which I completely missed. And if we take back. What does that do? Okay, sorry, that's idiotic. Let's say take. Okay, then I mate. Oh, because there's no king e2. So you can't take. So the only option is to defend the bishop with the queen or the rook. And if take, then white is fine. It would have been trickier though. I went queen f7, which isn't the best move, but I have no time on the clock. Pawn h6 is a good response. Queen g6 is the best response. Just targeting a bunch of things. Rook d1. Here, rook h5 is best, which I kind of considered. Rook g8, g3, queen f5, queen h5 is the best move. I didn't know. Oh, no, it comes with tempo on the rook, of course. So there's no time for d5. Right, okay. So queen f5 is a mistake because of king g2. Rook g4 is the best reply. And queen a3 is wrong. And bishop c5 is the only move. So I'm really happy to have found that. That's a really cool move to find. Of course, if I take, I get mated. That much is clear. If I retreat, then I thought queen e7 was still a problem. It's not the best move, but it is good. But bishop c5 hits the queen. You can't take because the rook hangs. The engine does actually like queen takes. I have to take rook g8, which I was going to play. That's wrong, apparently. I have to go queen e4, and if pawn f3, queen e3. If check, I block, and if you take, then I win the rook. So queen b3, rook h4, gh4, queen g4, and I thought I should be winning, but after king f1, I was like, well, if I give this check, you can just run, and I have nothing. And I thought I should be winning. So I went bishop d6 with the idea of taking, hanging the rook, right? So rook d2, queen h3, and bringing the queen back to d7 eventually. But I should have done it immediately, apparently. I wanted to play this bishop b4 move, but I couldn't make it work. I mean, a5 doesn't work because I hang mate, right? So I don't have time. I go to defend. But after rook c2, I'm in a bit of a pickle. And here, queen g4 is apparently the only move, which, yeah, I don't understand that. Bishop b4, bishop d2, queen g1, and then what up? Perpetual, I guess. c5 is the second best move. Queen c4. I was expecting this, to be honest. And I was going to go bishop here. And the engine thinks that white is better. So this was my plan. Bishop c4, though. Bishop f8 is the best response. Rook d2, and here cd4. Okay, bishop d4 isn't losing. I thought it was. But I have to find queen e7. Defending and attacking. And if rook e2, I need to find queen b4, which I don't know if I would have necessarily seen. I mean, still, it's uncomfortable because we can't take because of mate. And I still don't love the position, but maybe we can hold. Rook d4, though. Take. Queen e7, king f1, bishop h6. And this is just a drawn position. The drawn position. There's nothing to do. King g7. My opponent pushes for more. Queen f7, queen g4. Here, I feel like I should have blocked with bishop g5. Oh, no, you can't. No, the pawn's pinned. I completely missed that. It's a good job I didn't play that. King g1. And here I'm better. Queen d7, block. Queen d6. Check. I'm doing the right things. No, queen d1 is wrong. Why? I need to go queen b1. Queen g6. And bishop g5. Yeah, I need to go for this setup, I think. And this is what I missed. And if queen d7, I just block, the queen moves, and I just push the h-pawn, maybe? Queen h5? What's my idea? And if take... I pick up the bishop, I guess. But yeah, queen d1's a mistake. And here I have to just give a perpetual check. But I went for more. And this just loses. I completely missed queen f6. Now, if f6 isn't hanging, I'm okay. After queen e7, for example, I'm apparently fine. But let's say white doesn't go after the f6 pawn. Let's say f6 is defended. That would hang the queen. Let's say queen c7. Then I'm actually winning after king g6. And this was the type of position I was considering. I was like, well, white doesn't have any particularly good checks. In queen g3, I can play bishop g5, because if f4, you hang the bishop. And that was what I was considering. But I completely missed queen f6. And the only move is queen e6 in this position, which is a great find. Any other check and I'm okay. Like here, you can't go there. So let's say queen c7, and I kind of just run, I guess. But the problem is queen e6. And I only have f8, and then you take with check. So I don't have time to take the other bishop, and then I'm completely lost. My opponent played very, very well to find the mating net. And I thought I might have some kind of repetition, but there just wasn't. He played it very well, and eventually found this queen e6 idea. And I didn't want to go to d8 because of bishop f6. I thought that was a problem. I went to f8, so this couldn't come with check, but bishop e3, and I have no way of stopping bishop h6 because the queen also defends, and that's just checkmate. So very interesting game. Very interesting. A bit frustrating to throw the game away towards the end. I mean, it was just unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. I completely missed f6 hanging, but I guess I'm a bit out of practice, so it happens. It happens. But hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you learned a lot. If you want to see another very interesting game in the Slav Defense, check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of this climb to 2200 rapid, check out the playlist somewhere down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.